Good afternoon, everybody. I cannot believe this is our last session in our Providing Healthcare in a Pandemic webinar series. I'm so excited about all the sessions that we've had. Don't forget that there are recordings of all the sessions that will be up on our website by the end of day tomorrow, including this one. So please stay tuned to that, and you are welcome to share those videos with whoever you would like to. I will be providing a link to all the videos at the end of the session here. I'm Lisa Green. I'm a program coordinator for the Western New York Rural Area Health Education Center. And like I said, this series will be complete after this session. This session is self-care for first responders and healthcare professionals, presented by Catherine Cook-Cottone. I'll introduce her in just a sec, but as always, we do a little housekeeping first. Don't forget that the chat box is open, so please introduce yourselves. And if you have any questions during the presentation, don't hesitate to put them in the chat box. I'd be glad to ask questions for you. And I've already talked to Catherine, and she has no problem with breaking into her session to answer questions, so please do that. Don't forget that in the chat box, if you choose the panelists and audience, the questions will go out to everybody, and that's preferable so that everybody knows what your question is and we'll be able to see the answer in the chat. And if you have any follow-up questions or you'd like to connect with one of us at a later time, you can do so at that number there, 585-786-6275, or lgreen@r-ahec.org. And as always, don't forget to complete the evaluation page for the session. There's a link there. The link is also in the follow-up email that you will get after the session. So you can, if you have attended more than this session, you're welcome to go back and fill in evaluations for all the sessions. That's up to you, but it's very valuable to us so that we learn how to best present our webinar series. So let's meet our presenter. Catherine Cook-Cottone, PhD, is a professor at the University of Buffalo, specializing in embodied self-regulation and psychosocial disorders. She researches trauma-informed mindfulness and yoga curricula delivered, and is founder and president of Yogis in Service. In 2019, she received the American Psychological Association's Presidential Citation for Service. She's co-editor-in-chief of Eating Disorders, the Journal of Treatment and Prevention, and has written 8 books and over 75 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters. And I was just on her website today, and I think that number has increased to over 85 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters. She's served as a research and mindfulness consultant for the Recon and Sniper Foundation, the United Nations Foundation, and the Africa Yoga Project. So welcome, Catherine. How are you today?
Great. I'm so happy to be here, Lisa.
We are too. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and Catherine can start sharing her slides.
All right. So please, if you have any questions as I'm going through the slides and through these concepts, put them in the chat, and then Lisa will shout out and let me know if there's anything that I need to clarify further or explain more or give an example.
Absolutely.
All right, so we just did this part, so we're already moving right along. And Lisa did a really nice job of explaining my background. I came to self-care in a not a direct path. It wasn't what I had planned to research at all. I was researching and still do research self-regulation, and how do we take care of ourselves in a way that we can best serve our own interests as well as be in good relationship with others, and be in this world in a way that we really want to be present in it, right? Not in a way where we want to take ourselves out all the time in terms of having a few drinks or dissociating in some way, or and getting caught up in disorders that distract us, like gambling or shopping addictions. So that was my original plan. And what happened is that work took me right into self-care and trying to understand exactly the role self-care plays in our lives as this actionable way to self-regulate, actually. So overall, I'm going to talk about burnout and risk, which everyone I think can relate to right now. I'm going to highlight research on first responders. I'm very excited and proud to say that my daughter is now an EMT and she does the advanced life support unit with Twin Cities here in the Buffalo area in Western New York. And she very much loves her job. But her and I talk about these concepts all the time in terms of her well-being at her work. So burnout and risk, mindful self-care, the overall model and what it means, because it is not what you're possibly thinking. And then the underlying theory and science around that. And then how do we do it? Like, what's a model for change and how do we bring self-care into our lives in a way that'll really shift things for us on a daily basis? So to start, I want to just begin with a practice. It's 30 to 60 seconds, maybe a little more, of mindfulness and just getting a sense of how quickly we can actually downregulate our bodies. So while you're seated listening to the webinar, maybe watching the slide, put your feet on the floor, both feet flat on the floor. So if you have your legs crossed, uncross your legs and press your feet into the floor. And then notice your sitting bones, your glutes and your sitting bones on your chair, and press down into your chair, feet on the ground, sitting bones pressing into the chair, and using that groundedness then to lift yourself up through your core. So contracting through the core muscles, lifting up through the sternum and then through the crown of the head. And considering that pressing down into the earth and then lifting up into the core allows you to soften the shoulders, soften your jaw, and feel well supported. So you're not needing to hold yourself up by your shoulders. So feet pressing down, sit bones down, core active, reaching through the crown of your head, soft shoulders, soft jaw. And if it feels okay for you, you can soften or close your eyes. And then simply orient your awareness towards your breath. So you're just taking your attention and just orienting it, pointing your attention towards your breath. Breathing in and breathing out. And now we're going to extend the inhalations and exhalations. So on your next inhalation, are you ready? Inhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Inhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. One more round. Inhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then allow your breath just to return to its natural rhythm. And if your eyes were closed, you can open them. If they were softened, orient yourself back to the slide. And then just take a quick scan of your body. I know for me, even when I instruct this, I notice a down regulation of my body. And that means there's a decrease in muscle tension. It's likely that if I had stress hormones moving through my body, that they've stopped doing that, right? It takes about a minute or two to stop that and begin the calming response. And so I'm alert, I'm engaged, right? I'm not activated, and I'm also not shut down. And we're working toward alert and engaged. Good, thank you for participating. So we'll be focusing on the cultivation of the mindful first responder and healthcare professional. So mindful self-care begins with considering the mindful work we can do on our own job. So we are first responders, we are healthcare professionals. I'm a psychologist, and I love doing this work, and I do a lot of consulting and in war zones and in areas where my body would be activated and defensive. And so in that case, these skills become very important in terms of me managing my own stress response and being able to be effective in my work. So we begin with a concept that's old, but also very new in terms of research. And the idea is embodiment. It is being in and of your body. There's a Latin term, nemo dat quam non habet, that means that you cannot give what you do not have. And the original term was meant to mean that if my neighbor had a boat and I sold my neighbor's boat to someone else, I cannot do that because I never owned the boat in the first place. You cannot sell what is not yours. But I've come to understand it in terms of self-care and mindfulness and groundedness and effectiveness and stability is, as a helping professional, if I want to offer that to someone else, I can't give it if it's not mine already in my own body. I cannot give what I do not have. And so when we're interacting as either in customer service, if we're interacting with clients, with patients, what becomes powerful beyond the intervention that we're giving is our own presence, our own way of being with the other individual in front of us or group of individuals. And when you have a self-regulated presence, when you are well-grounded, when you are thoughtful, it calms the nervous systems around you. And no matter what you're doing, no matter how high energy, how high crisis that moment is, the more regulated your nervous system, the safer the nervous systems will feel around you. So I always go back to, I cannot give what I do not have. And that motivates me. That is one of my primary motivators to keep my practices up, my self-care practices up, because I want to be able to be that grounding force for the people around me. The other thing that happens when we engage in mindful self-care is our lives become more sustainable. People often say to me, they're like, how do you do everything you do without, burning out or becoming exhausted? And it's because of my mindful self-care practice. And I'll show you, let me tell you a story first, and then I'll show you the balancing of that. If you haven't heard this fable, it's the fable of being busy cutting wood. And so there's an older man, and you can see him here cutting wood, and he's got quite a job in front of him. And I think that's about how many of us feel about our inbox and our emails, as well as the challenges that are in front of us right now with the pandemic. And we're cutting wood, and a young man comes up and says, why don't you pause and sharpen your saw? And the older man says, can't you see I'm busy here, I'm busy cutting wood. Right? And the young man's, but if you stopped and sharpened your saw, you could be so much more effective. And the old man continued on, and getting stuck right here, halfway through the tree, exhausted, right? So many times we don't stop to sharpen the saw. And what are the consequences of that? They can be substantial and they can be physical. And they can actually impact your health and well-being, not only just how you feel about your job and your clients, but how you're doing in terms of your immune system being able to defend you from all kinds of things, as well as just a total breakdown of the system, putting you at risk for whatever you were already potentially genetically at risk for prior to the stress. So burnout and vicarious trauma are two things that I want to talk about. I'm sure you've heard of both, but I just want to touch on them. And if not, I'm excited to be the person who's sharing this with you because it's very important. So burnout has been defined in a variety of ways. One of the main people is Maslach, and her work has been studying burnout for years. No matter what approach that you look at in terms of defining burnout, it always comes back to emotional depletion. And remember where we just talked about you cannot give what you do not have? So when we get burnout, we end up being emotionally depleted and we have nothing to offer, not only our clients we are working to serve, many of us, it's our reason for being to serve our clients. It's what we're here for. It's our mission in life. But then we end up too emotionally depleted to do what we were meant to do. And then we also can bring that emotion depletion home, right? And so when our loved ones need us, we don't have anything to give them. It's physical, it's emotional, and both aspects of the self become exhausted. It also can evolve into a form of negative self-concept where you don't think that you're making a difference anymore. You don't think you matter anymore. And it can really feel like that's true when it's burnout. If you were to talk to your colleagues, they'd be like, oh my gosh, we need you. You're amazing. You're wonderful, right? But you've gotten to the point in burnout where you're unable to see your own impact. And then it can manifest in negative job attitudes. So just coming in and really struggling to orient positively. My kids introduced me to TikTok, and I've been watching. My stream is a lot of teachers. I get on this stream, and teachers really struggling teaching online with Zoom, and a lot of the TikToks are on how they're trying to get themselves rallied to be there for their students, and it's really clear that there's a global pandemic, not only of the coronavirus, but of burnout. And then the one that's super concerning is the loss of concerns and feelings for clients. So you start to feel like clients are numbers. They don't, you start depersonalizing their experience. And that's for those, there's a slide on this slide is important to me. And I want you to pay attention. Also, pay attention because this matters for you and for the people that this really comes home to, kind of lands in your heart. Just take a minute and feel this. All these slides are research-based, and I have the citations here. Those most committed and dedicated to their work are often the most vulnerable. So those of us who care the most are most at risk. Vicarious trauma is another thing that can happen, and it becomes particularly important for during the pandemic, as well as always, for first responders and healthcare professionals. And there can be effects of cumulative impact of working with individuals who are going through their own trauma that can affect your identity, your worldview, and your psychological needs, beliefs, and even your memory. So you can start to have mental health symptoms related to experiencing vicarious trauma. Another term I want you to consider is complicated burnout. And this is when you experience burnout and then you also have, we call it secondary stress or vicarious trauma, watching other people go through really extremely difficult things. This is when we can start seeing a negative impact on our physical health, as this shows up in our neuroendocrine systems, our autonomic system, our metabolic systems, and even our immune systems. So in particular, what are the outcomes? So there is a risk in helping. And it's tough because I think nearly all of us in this field, I actually have never met anyone who wasn't drawn or felt a calling to be in this field. So drawn or called to help, are facing, a risk to your own well-being. So when we look at the research, and this article is a systematic review, which means it brought together many articles, looked at what is happening with first responders. And this is like pre-COVID, 2017. So post-traumatic stress disorder is one of the risks, depression, suicidality, anxiety, alcohol and substance use, and sleep disturbances. when I'm looking at 2020 in particular, and this slide I used with a presentation I was giving to humanitarian workers, because not only are we facing so much stress on the home front here in the United States, um, our sisters and brothers out actively helping people in other countries are also experiencing tremendous stress, comparable to what's happening here in the States, and in some cases even broader and more severe. So what's happening in 2020? So we have the pandemic and its impact, the high mortality rates, and every day they're still getting higher. And then the inequality and who's affected, right? And that matters because it's creating tension, right? It's creating social unrest. It's contributing to social unrest. And because of that and other factors, we're also going through a period of important social change. There's political stress. So many of us have loved ones that have different political viewpoints, making friendships and even family relationships difficult sometimes. There's ongoing war and conflict, immigration, refugee camps. There's so much right now. I have friends that are working in the refugee shelters here, as well as in domestic violence shelters. I run a not-for-profit called Yogis in Service, and we do yoga with a whole bunch of not-for-profits in the area. So we're working with people that are struggling with recovery from domestic violence or refugees. And the rates of domestic violence are also on the increase. I'll skip down here to these two here, isolation and crowding. The pandemic is causing so much uncertainty, right? Which stresses us all out. The brain and the body loves certainty. It loves routine. And so we have a ton of certainty, which is already stressful for the nervous system. And then we have isolation from our community members. Like for me, I love going to practice yoga with my friends in a studio. I like to actually go to work and be at a work meeting in the same room with my colleagues. I like to do a lot of things that are social. I love to go to concerts. Craft. To make it through a holiday without going to a craft show is difficult. And even we sell things for a not-for-profit at craft festivals that we make a lot of money, events, so many things, not being able to go. So we're isolated. And then oddly, we're crowded with the same 1 or 2 or 4 people, which we love them so much, right? But to spend 6 months alone with them, or gosh, pushing 8 months now with just those people, there's a sense of crowding while you're still feeling isolation. So it can be very overwhelming. Those conditions are actually not good for domestic violence. They're not good for substance use, right? When you can't get out, you can't take space from people. People end up taking space by drinking. I'll just take myself out, right? And so we're having increasing rates of substance use, we're having increasing rates of suicide, and we're having increasing rates of domestic violence. And then everything's getting filtered, just like this webinar, through technology, including access. So like if you need something and your internet goes down, right? So we have this whole access issue. In fact, I drove into the university to do this webinar because our internet at home, I never know for sure what is going to happen. Most of the time it's good, but right? I can't count on it. All right, risk of helping for health professionals during COVID-19. So what is going on? So actually getting COVID-19 is a risk factor. And here are all the things that increase your risk: working in a high risk department. So definitely the COVID floors of a hospital. We have St. Joe's here is the COVID hospital. But ERs, and then sending people, and all, like my daughter as an EMT, she's a transport person. Anybody in transport, ER, or in the COVID wings are all at increased risk. A diagnosed family member, not being able to do your hygiene as much as you hope to because the job is so busy, improper PPE use, close contact with patients, long hours, unprotected exposure, all put you at more risk. And this is a study that was just published very recently, 2020. And then the most common symptoms are the fever, cough, and weakness, and then actually damage from the PPE. So people getting skin damage at the nasal bridge is the most common site, but people having skin damage on their face from the PPE. And then healthcare workers, and this is the part I highlighted, it's the mental health impact. So we have increased rates of depression, increased rates of anxiety, increased rates of insomnia, and increased rates of distress. The other things that I found in a variety of different studies, this is all increased, well, let me go through each one. There's increased risk for internet addiction. For healthcare workers, it's 9.7%. Occupational stress linked to alcohol use, substance use, and smoking among paramedics. So I pulled some from specific populations. And burnout associated with increased maladaptive coping, self-blame, behavioral disengagement, and substance use. And this is among medical doctors. So across the healthcare profession, there's increased risk of helping. All right, let's take a breath here and just lots of stats. So breathe in stats and breathe out just being here. Yeah. And settling with those numbers. And some people say, like, I'm not a stats person, and I get that. I think that stats help us realize how at risk we really are, right? And I think acknowledging that risk is important in motivating us to take good care of ourselves. So in mindfulness, there's this concept called the hungry ghost. And this is actually I put the link to where I got this image. It's an old image, but that's what they say in the ancient text on what the hungry ghost looks like. But it's an apparition that eats and eats and eats and is never fulfilled. So it always is hungry and can never be full. And it's the metaphor that's used for us trying to understand addiction, right? That when we get caught up in these things that really don't fulfill us and they're distracting us in a way, helping us cope in the moment, we know they're addictive because they don't satisfy. They might satisfy this moment, but we need them again right away. They don't solve the problem, right? They're not addressing what's happening in our system. They're just for the moment taking us out. And then we come back in and we still have overwhelmed and right. And then we take ourselves back out. And so it's a perpetuating cycle that they call the hungry ghost. And you can think about, consider in your life, like, are there certain behaviors that are hungry ghost-like in your life where they don't seem to truly solve the problem? They're not helping you sleep better. They're actually causing more pain. So addiction and disembodiment, they take us out of our bodies and they don't solve any of our struggles. Another thing that's happening that's really disembodying, and I referred to it in regard to healthcare workers and internet addiction, this is pre-COVID, where adults are spending 3.5 hours per day on the internet and their phone. And it's way worse now. I was trying to find, there isn't a published study that I could find. There's some, this is actually Washington Post 2020, 320, and that's March 24th. So we know that it's way up. You're on it for work, you're on it to relate to people. Even my family does Zoom calls on the weekend so we can get together, but it's still through the internet, right? So we're not embodied. So this is another thing that's happening. So what to do? So in my presentations, I like to use poetry because poetry is actually very sensational. It includes sensations. Poets are people that have found a way for words to move us, for words to awaken us physically and emotionally. This is Rumi, a poet from the Middle East. This is how a human being can change. There's a worm addicted to eating grape leaves. Suddenly he wakes up, call it grace, whatever. Something wakes him, and he's no longer a worm. He's the entire vineyard and the orchard too. The fruit, the trunks, a growing wisdom, and a joy that doesn't need to devour. And this is what we seek. We seek practices that, as we do them, we notice that there's less craving. We notice that there's a less drive to escape, right? That we can be present, that we're starting to have a life that we want to be present in. So the core of this work comes from a model that I first published in 2006. And now it's we've studied it in lots of different ways. And this is actually how I came to self-care, trying to validate this model. So here you are in the middle, the embodied self. And on one side is your internal experience of self, your physical body, your physiological self, right here, right now, exactly as it is. Your emotional sensations, your emotional experiences, how you're feeling. And then your cognitions, your thoughts. And your thoughts and your feelings, they reside on a platform of your physiological self. One way that I can demonstrate to you how this works is consider that when you're hungry, right, and you haven't eaten, it directly impacts your emotions and your thoughts. Some people worse than others. My husband and one of my daughters, right? If they're upset, first thing I do is I check in to see if they've eaten and then we'll talk, right? So consider that your physiology, your body is this platform upon which your feeling self and your thinking self reside. And so when we look at self-care, we really want to start at how is my physical body doing and how am I caring for it, right? And then we work in our lives to keep these things self-regulated and together so that as a collected self, we then interface with our own families, with our communities, and with our culture, right? As a good citizen, here as a good family member, a good partner, a good sister, brother, mother, father, and then our community. And here, as helping professionals, we serve our communities. So how we show up here, right? We work to stay attuned here, matters in terms of how we show up for ourselves here. And what happens with helping professionals, and I can relate to this, is that we become, and in fact, this is something my team is trying to figure out. There's some evidence that for highly empathic people that feel other people's feelings, that are driven to help other people, that our entire systems are actually oriented to care for others. And to such a degree that when we reinforce that and when that becomes our career, we often tune out our own needs. We tune out our own awareness. When I was here and in work and in private practice and going through tenure, there would be days where I didn't even go to the bathroom. And I wouldn't realize it until I was walking to the car. And I was like, oh my Lord, I didn't even notice what my body needed. And I know that's true for people that are doing a shift and helping others, whether you're on transport or you're in the police force, in the fire department. So all of us helping professionals, we can become so oriented on the needs of others that we abandon our own well-being. And some points really severe, like not eating all day, not sleeping for days at a time, right? So we orient to the external system, and this is not sustainable. It puts our body, not only is your body stressed then from the job, but your body's stressed from being entirely neglected. So it has stress on stress. And that's dangerous, actually. It's not even good for the people we're trying to help, right? And remember, we cannot give what we do not have. So what are we delivering out there? So I want to consider that perhaps we are these two-winged birds, and I chose the blue heron. It's my favorite bird. It's just an incredibly beautiful bird, but also they visit us here and live here in Western New York. And so I feel like it's in a way our bird, right? That I can identify with the beauty of the blue heron living in this area. And that in order to fly straight and be effective, like we need both of the wings. And one of the wings is your sense of mission, like serving and protecting your community. I mean, for me, that drives me and gets me going every day. I grew up military, and I was raised in military and education as the two main professions of my family. And I believe that I just was I was born to serve, right? And I know many of you can identify with that. And so that sense of mission of serving and protecting your community, your country, is very strong. However, if we only have that wing can become fatigued and even damaged because it doesn't have sufficient support. On the other hand, we have self-care. And this is protecting your professional efficacy as well as your personal well-being, right? You know, when you're completely fried, that exhausted, you cannot show up for others, right? So not only does self-care protect you, but it protects how well you can do your job and how well you can actually perform your mission. But if you were only to be in self-care and had no sense of mission, and this is me on vacation, I'm flying in a circle. I'm like, let's help others. Let's go do something. I'm going to work on that PowerPoint, right? So that's something I'm working on to get better at vacation. However, if we were to just have a life of self-care, we lack meaning and purpose, right? So we actually want both. And those of us in the service field can relate. We tend to be all mission, no self-care, and we want to really balance that out. And then we're flying steady and powerfully. We're balancing great effort and great rest. And that is sustainable. This comes from Daniel Siegel, and he is I think he's a psychiatrist. I think that's his, I know that's his training. However, he's now a beloved theorist and guide for the neuropsychological and neuroanatomical understanding of relationships and professional self-care. So he's very well known. He also has good parenting books. So I encourage you to look him up. So the self-care imperative, because no matter the challenges we confront, there's no escaping this reality. No matter what others or we try to say about it, if we don't care for ourselves, we'll be limited in how we can care for others. It's that simple. It's that important for you, for others, and for our planet. So really trying to discard the myth that we don't need to take care of ourselves. And oh gosh, my daughter, I keep telling her, I have to memorize this person's name. Hopefully I put it in my notes. My daughter's listening to this wonderful podcast, and I did. It's Kizzy Lemon. And I love this quote. So it'll be in my next slideshow after this. It's really hard to hurt yourself without hurting other people. Consider that. It's really hard to hurt yourself without hurting other people. So thinking about, I can neglect my self-care, but what does that mean for if I fall asleep and driving, right? What does it mean if I lose my temper on my children? What does that mean if 4 drinks in, I don't remember what I said and I hurt my wife or my husband, right? So thinking that through, it's really hard to hurt yourself without hurting other people. So self-care becomes this antidote to neglect and overdoing. So now I'm going to get into the theory behind mindful self-care, which is the kind of self-care that I'm I'm asserting would potentially help you. I think for sure would help, and I'll show you the research, but let's just live the question, right? So first, this kind of self-care asks us to be mindful. And mindfulness means paying attention to what's happening in the present moment in the mind, body, and external environment with an attitude of curiosity and kindness. So grounding your feet, connecting to the chair below you. And if you're standing, just to the earth, finding your core, finding your breath, and then orienting right here, right now, right? Being able to be here. That is mindfulness. The next thing that mindfulness asked is for curiosity. This is another poet, Rilke. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. And so I love living questions. So think about this. We don't always need the answer. We could say, what? I wonder about, which I love. I wonder. Wondering makes your life wonderful. Like if your life is filled with wondering and wonder, your life becomes wonderful, right? So we orient ourselves. What would it mean? What if I wonder what it would be like if I did X, Y, and Z every day? Or I wonder what it means to really love and take care of yourself. I don't know, but I'm going to keep asking that question, right?
Hey, Catherine, can I break in for a sec?
Yeah.
So Janelle asked, whose quote was it? It's impossible to hurt yourself, or it's very difficult to hurt yourself without hurting other people.
Okay. I'll spell his name because I'm not, I don't want to say, I think I might be saying it wrong, but isn't that a great quote? I love
It's
my daughter.
awesome.
It's so good because we have that fantasy, right? That I can take myself out, whatever, drinking, whatever I'm doing, and it's not gonna. But I don't know a single person in my life that I love or struggle with that if they're hurting themselves, that's hurting me too. Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's Kiese, Kiese. That's his first name, and his last name is Laymon. And he does a bunch of social justice stuff, and uh, and stuff just on being. Another quote: "Love me enough to tell me the truth." My daughter she's listening to his podcast, and she's like, "This is another one." Love me enough to tell me the truth.
That's great too.
Yeah, yeah. So that I have him queued up on Audible for my next book to listen to. So he has at least one book, maybe more, and then he does podcasts. But Chloe, the one that's the EMT, is listening to him right now. That's something for the pandemic that has shifted in my life. I need to get out and walk because I'm just sitting in front of my computer. And so I've begun listening to books on tape while I'm walking instead of the news, because the news can just be so much of the same thing over and over. So I get the news, I care about the news. And then if I'm walking, I'll put on a book on tape or a podcast so I can it's been a wonderful form of self-care for me to stop the rumination about everything that's going on. So living our way into the truth. So asking these questions. And you could even, those quotes could be, you can live that question. What does that really mean? It's hard to hurt yourself without hurting other people. I could just contemplate that for a week, for a month, and just consider what that might mean to me. And then loving kindness is central. Sharon Salzberg is a prolific writer in mindfulness. Loving kindness is really important. So it's not only paying attention, but it's paying attention in a way that is kind to yourself. I work with patients who have substance use and trauma and eating disorders, and some of them are actually really good at paying attention to themselves, but they're cruel to themselves, right? And so that's not the attention that we're talking about. It's more non-judgmental and with loving kindness. So with mindfulness, loving kindness, and self-compassion, we begin to let go of our expectations about how life and those we love should be. And we start looking at, and that includes ourselves, right? Like, how am I right here, right now? That doesn't mean we don't have goals and we don't aspire to evolve into the people that we were meant to be. But acceptance ends up being this really critical foundation for change. And you think, huh? But it's really cool. To change, I must accept myself exactly where I am. And then in that acceptance, oh, all the good, all the bad, from that awareness, now I can change. But if I pretend I'm somewhere where I'm not, how do I effectively change from there? Right? So, this loving kindness and acceptance of exactly where I am gives me the groundedness to really change. And then embodiment is key to what we're talking about. So, the mindful self care is about actionable things in your body right now. So, embodiment is a way of being as residing from, being from, manifesting from your own body right here, right now, that internal part, your physiology, your emotions, and your thoughts, and then how you're showing up interpersonally, socially, and culturally. And this is really important part, and existentially. And what does that mean? It means, why are you here? What are you up to? What's your mission? So every day, right? How are you embodying that mission? And it could be like to be like a loving mother to my children. It could be to be the most effective paramedic. Well, not, let's take competition out of it. My family is super competitive. It's hard. It's like in my bones to compete. We go to the beach and try to build the fanciest, sandcastle. We can't just lay there, right? My goal is to learn how to lay at the beach and not do anything. So to be an effective EMT or paramedic, right? To be calm and collected while I take really effective care of the patient, right? So what am I up to? The existential dimension in life. This is I love this picture. I am not in front of my body. I am in my body, or rather I am my body. And this is Merleau-Ponty. He's a philosopher, and this comes from his book Philosophy of the Flesh. So this idea of like, I am my body. I'm not just ideas. Thinking about taking care of myself is not good enough. I actually have to take care of myself. And then some other proverbs that can be helpful or ideas. So I do some work in Africa, and one of my favorite things I've learned there is this African proverb: never leave yourself. And living that question, I've come to notice that whenever I hurt myself or someone else, I have left myself in some way. Like I'm not as safe of a person. But when I'm grounded and present, my breath is moving through me, the odds of me hurting someone else are really low, if at all, when I'm right here and I'm paying attention, right? So never leaving yourself. And this makes you like a safer person for yourself and other people. You become someone that other people want to be around. And then this Chinese symbol for presence. Look at the pieces in it. And so their symbols are iconic. They each piece of the symbol represents the components, the conceptual components. So the eyes, the ears, undivided attention, the heart, right? So presence is inward and outward. So that embodiment. All right, and now we get to like the model for the mindful self-care. So we want to be positively embodied. We want to be actionable in our lives. And there are 4 domains where we can really make that happen. I've been talking about mindful self-care, and it's right here. And then also mission and purpose. I've alluded to that. When I have a scheduled practice of mindful self-care, like yesterday morning, I ran with my friends Lynn and Patrina, and we didn't just wake up at 6 a.m. and be like, hey, what's up? Can you guys go? We planned it so that we had this run. And then during the run, and we don't go fast. My running mantra is I run for relationships, not speed. So we go slow and we talk, and we got laughing at one point so hard that we had to stop running. And that happened in my life because I planned a run with my friends. I planned it. I scheduled a pleasant event that was good for my body, right? So this offers structure and predictability. In fact, I have a run planned for tomorrow, right? I my kids went to college, I took up horseback riding. I have horseback riding this afternoon because it's scheduled. It's going to happen. So these things aren't just falling from the sky. I'm scheduling things that make it my life a life I want to be present in, right? And then my sense of mission and purpose, it's part of why I'm here right now. This moment right here, right now is happening because I have a sense of mission and purpose to have effective helping professionals that don't get eaten up by the world, right? That we can be in this and of this and do our powerful work without getting eaten alive. And that, gets me going every day, training my students here, and doing things like this. It's very important to me. And that affects this moment. And I knew this morning that I was doing this today, right? So it gives me a sense of predictability and structure in my life that I can count on really good things happening because I set them up that way. The pandemic has been really hard because it's taken some people, live for the next concert of their favorite band. My husband and I were supposed to go with my brother to Paris to see Pearl Jam. So anybody who's a child of that generation could understand concert cancels, flight cancel. We're hoping to go at some point. We have the tickets. But when the pandemic has taken a bit of that out, and so what we want to do is still have a sense that I can schedule, even if it's through Zoom or even if it's, social distance, but that just because it's the pandemic, we don't quit, right? I love horseback riding. We can do it with masks on and we're fine in the barn and it's great. And then, so those up here offer structure and predictability. And then down here, we have these helping us with challenges. So when we look toward the past, and here see this dimension of time, I'll go through the dimensions next. Honoring effort and struggle. So that loving kindness, looking back, we have all failed. I've failed, you've failed. If you're over 6 months old, you've already failed. Life, if you're really trying, is going to be filled with failure and heartache, right? If you dive in at all, that's what happens. And so what do we do with that? We look at effort and struggle with honor, with loving, kind reflection. So I can kind of tell you, my daughter, who's the EMT, when she was little, we were sitting at the kitchen table and she was trying to write and I was trying to get tenure. So I was really distracted working on an article on the computer on the table. And she goes, "Mommy, how do you spell dream?" And I said, "Oh, DREAM. DREAM." And then I looked up and she was like scribbling out, like scratching out what she had written really hard. So hard it was like you could feel it, like she had dented the paper. And I go, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "I made a mistake. It was bad." I go, "Well, what? Let me see." And she had spelled, so she showed me, she spelled DREEM. DREEM. And I said, "Chloe, that's like 1, 2, 3, 4. There's DREEM. There's 5 letters. You had 4 right. Like, and you just got that one E, but 2 vowels go walking. The first one does the talking. Like, you got the phonetics right. Like, you got that right. Like, you just had that one little letter and it doesn't even make sense anyways. Why is there an A in there, right?" And she was like, "Oh." But if we're just I could just say, "Oh, you made a mistake. You were wrong." But when we do that, when we throw the whole thing in the trash, we don't get to see the nuance of, oh, how close we were to getting it. But we don't honor like all the stuff we got right. So when I work with patients that are trying to not have a drink or trying to not have an eating disorder symptom, whatever it is, I want to know about the times, like what did you get right in there? Like, tell me about it. Like digging into there. So it's not pretending nothing bad has happened or we didn't get it wrong. Like, oh gosh, that's a hard one. That's hard, right? You got that wrong. but what was going on? And I want to hear about it. And then honoring the stuff in there that we did get right. And then honoring how hard we were trying. So that's the orientation there. And then when we look over here to be with and work with skills, and I'm going to go through a little bit of each of these so you get another sense with examples. This is how in the present moment, when an emotion comes or an event happens, that we have some tools to either just be with it. And I assert many times, just being with is enough. So many times we try to fix, and just being with is enough. So practicing being with. And then when it makes sense, work with what's there. So these domains help us not only in the present moment, like mindful self-care sets us up in the present moment to experience healthy, good things. And we have be with, work with skills for what shows up. And then as we look at our life over time, right? Where am I headed? Toward mission, toward a sense of purpose and meaning in my life. And when I look back at with compassion and honoring the effort and struggle. And this is the framework for so positive embodiment and mindful self-care can be so conceptual, right? So let's look at that a little more. So mindful self-care. I'm going to make this so actionable, you're not going to believe it. You're like, that is actionable. And then if you hate the word actionable, I apologize. So we developed a scale that assesses your mindful self-care because we wanted people to be able to take it and make a plan. And we did all these things that researchers do. Me and my colleague, Dr. Wendy Geiger, created, I don't know how many items. There had to be 200, and the students helped us, and we got expert advice, all this. And then we did a thing called factor analysis, confirmatory, exploratory, and confirmatory. And we ended up with a scientifically validated scale. And it has these domains in it: physical care, self-compassion and purpose, mindful awareness, mindful relaxation, supportive relationships, and supportive structure. And let me show you a little more what that's about. So our plan is that you begin with an assessment. So I don't know if I can click on this, if it will go. Yeah, this is, if you go to this link, this is just a screenshot I took of the page here at UB. You can take the assessment and then it will email you back your score on each of these domains. And if you look here where it says standard scale domains, that and links that you'll get with the email that kicks you back your scores has TED Talks, tells you how to set goals in that area, gives you all the resources you need to bump up your self-care in each of those domains. If your score is high, you might consider, okay, that area is good. If you get low or medium, you might consider adding some self-care. So let's see. This is another place. I have my website. This is another place where you can actually find the assessment. And you can also find paper versions of it that you can print out, electronic versions that you can print out on paper if you want to take it. There's an 84 one, 84 items, 33 items, and then a brief one that we only use for research sometimes. It's brief and it's when we have to be really brief. But I recommend the 33 item one, which you can take online, or the 84 item one if you really want to dig in. I use the 84 item one with patients and with students and in yoga teacher trainees. So there's another place.
So let me break in here just really quick. Lauren had said, can we get a copy of this PowerPoint? I love these reminders. So definitely anyone who was on the webinar today, and actually anyone who registered for the PowerPoint, will get a copy of the slides. And that's okay with you, right, Catherine?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Will do.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and then you'll have the link and everything to go through. But you can just also Google. Nobody else has my last name, Cook-Cottone. So Google my last name and then mindful self-care, and you'll find one of those links. if you dig in a little bit. You should be able to find it right away, especially this one at UB. And you could also see how it says mindful wellness assessment. That will take you, go mindful wellness assessment UB, it'll go right to that page. Okay, in the scale, we did this on purpose because we started studying the scale with community members, but then we moved right away into studying medical residents here at the university and then at the Mayo Clinic. So there's two types of practice, formal and informal. So formal means dedicated time. Like I went to yoga class or I sat down and I don't know, I sat in the kitchen and prepped meals for the week. That's like you're taking dedicated time to do something that's self-care. And that can be particularly difficult for people that have a crazy schedule. Medical residents, they are scheduled to work literally half of the hours of every day. So if there's 24 hours, they are legally or guidelines wise allowed to be scheduled 12 hours of that. And I know my daughter, Chloe, does 12-hour shifts as a EMT, right? So when half your day is already work, it gets tough to build in. So what we found is the informal practices, and those are practices where you weave in the experience, become really important. So an example is an informal practice that I do is I am the laundry doer for my house. So when I do laundry, everything that I fold that is for someone else, I actually send, like, I kind of meditate on the person and then imagine them wearing it, right? And then send them, like, I fold a wish in with, so instead of laundry being something that I'm like, laundry, right? Which was my mom's relationship with laundry was really dysfunctional. She had 5 kids and a husband in the military, and it was like laundry undid her. And so I said, I want to have a more positive relationship with laundry. And that's really mindfulness and self-care. It's not that laundry goes away unless you get really, really rich and somebody else can do your laundry. That's not going to be my story, but that I have a better relationship with laundry, right? So it's really shifting. What is our relationship with these things? So informal practices could be, let's say I'm a medical doctor and I see 5 patients in a row, 10 patients in a row. When I have to wash my hands in between every patient anyways, what if I did a loving kindness meditation for the patient that I just saw, right? So it's adding in a practice, weaving it into your day without having to add dedicated time. And then what you do is you take the scale, right? You look at your domains, you set some goals, and then you try, you embody them, you engage in the behaviors, and then you do that for a while, and then you retake the assessment. And this is forever, like your whole life, because things will change. Your kids grow. Your kids now have after school stuff. Your kids now are you have a different partner. Like so many things can change. You get a different job. So we're just constantly reevaluating our self-care. I'm going to go through these ones just to show you, because you're going to take the scale and see them. But this is essentially what it looks like. So they're pretty simple. Like I drank 6 to 8 cups of water a day. That right there can take your system out of some distress. If you're always thirsty, your system's already stressed, right? Eating a variety of foods, planning meals and snacks, exercising. I know, but you should. And every single one of these is based on research. The World Health Organization and the CDC both say 60 minutes a day for adults. So I put that in my schedule, and people often say, like, they'll be like, oh, I didn't know you were your age. Right. And I'm like, I think it's because I take care. Well, I know, like I am my age, but I'm also my body being taken care of for all those years, as opposed to breaking it down. So these are, you can see some examples. Self-compassion and purpose. This is finding your sense of meaning. Reminding myself that failure and challenge are part of the human experience. So these are manageable, yeah. Calm awareness of thoughts, calm awareness of feelings. These are all different ways to relax. How to create structure in your life so that your life is easier. And this one's really important, especially for helping professionals. Spending time with people who are good to me. Not just time with people. This one's really important. It's the people that are good to you, that lift you up, right? That are there that you could really have heart to hearts with, or not. Like you don't want to, you don't have to. You don't have to explain yourself. Those people. Scheduling, planning time to be with people who are special to me, not just people, but the ones that matter to you, right? So people that will listen when you say no, right? So that one becomes very important to helping professionals. And then we have some general questions where you're planning your self-care, exploring new ways, because our questions don't cover everything. Obviously, we couldn't. There's a billion ways to take care of yourself, but it's just to get you thinking about it. So we know this works because there is a plethora of research on the mindful self-care scale now. Well, we were really excited recently to find out that the National Institute of Health used our scale to study their doctors and nurses at their National Institute of Health building. And I just discovered that incidentally. I got an alert, said, oh, your work's been cited. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the National Institute of Health used our scale. It's now in Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, Turkish, and Dutch. So this is being used all over the world. We know for a fact that the higher your self-care, the less your substance use, the less your body dissatisfaction, the less your burnout, the higher your quality of life, the higher your compassion satisfaction across the board. So the more that you do, and there's just more research than I can even get into. And we started trying to keep track of it all, but now if you use Google Scholar, you can keep up on you can set an alert and keep up on all the research on it. So a ton of research on our scale, and we've only done some of it. We have lots of help across the world. This is one, and this is Jason Hotchkiss, who is now one of our partners in helping us better understand the scale. And he is a hospice chaplain, and he studied it among hospice workers, which I think is I share this because I think it's a powerful attestation to the practice. So here, this is from his article. He showed how looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and where we really get impacted by burnout and secondary trauma and stress, well-being detractors, how this all right here on the left side is all the mindful self-care scale. And he sees those as well-being promoters, taking us all the way up through each level of Maslow's hierarchy. So once I saw that article, I tracked him down. I'm like, hey, let's work together. So we're hopefully writing a book soon. We have a proposal into Cambridge University Press. So we're fingers crossed. And so it'd be Jason, Wendy, and I. So some practices to leave you with in our talk today. So being with and working with practices. So what could those look like? So one of them is grounding emotions. Me as a psychologist, this ends up being very important, but it's also important for healthcare workers and first responders, because you're going to be faced with, this, highly emotional experiences where other people are having life-changing events happening. And we've done this work with humanitarians working in war zones that are in very similar circumstances, where people are having life-changing events happen and they're having the emotions come right at them. Consider that you don't have to catch the emotions, you don't have to manage other people's emotions, that you can let them move through you. And the most powerful thing you can do is to be a grounding force, right? Now, obviously we can't let somebody hurt someone else, but that's typically not what's going on when somebody's in shock and in reaction, right? They're literally starting to fall apart. So as the emotions are there, imagine that you, like a lightning rod, can ground them and they come in and through and out of you into the ground. So try this one and live the question before you go, I do this in private practice all the time. And in this way, the person feels very well held and listened to, as opposed to you blocking the emotions, right? They're come in, breathe, and ground, right? And you can even reflect. I can see, like, this is very upsetting. These are tremendously huge and overwhelming emotions, right? And you're letting come in and ground. If I'm on the computer, and so if you're doing intake, right, you're needing to put very big facts and emotions, imagine they go right into the computer. And when I'm in private practice, I imagine them go in the folder and then my file cabinet holds them. And then for our own lives and for what happens at work, you could even write them on rocks if that's helpful. We like to do at my house, we have a fire in the backyard every Friday night, and you can imagine on a stick and throw it in the fire and some people say let go and let God, right? So the idea that I don't have to hold these issues in my tissues and carry around the baggage, that I can imagine them in the rocks, grounded through me, and letting them move. Another one is riding the wave of the emotion. So this is an emotion in your own body. And this comes from mindfulness-based relapse prevention. So here are the tips. Don't try to keep the emotion around. Don't hold on to it, and don't amplify it. Simply be with it. You're not going to try to block it or suppress it. You're not going to get rid of it or push it away. As a wave, it's coming and going. And emotions go like this. And it's fascinating when you don't tangle with it, you can watch it move through you. And this way in your system, it's not held, it's not blocked, it's not going to recur as frequently. There's tons of tools for working with emotion. These are just two simple ones. And then this meditation, it's free. I have a typo, but it's insight timer, not insight timer. It's an application, and that one's free. And then it's on Simple Habit, and Simple Habit, has a low monthly rate. But the same meditation I recorded on both of these meditation apps. I encourage to check out meditation apps if you haven't meditated before, because there's so many wonderful meditations that can last 1, 2, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, that guide you through the process of meditating. So the Insight Timer worry tree, the meditation is a tree that can hold your worries for you. So you can be at work, so you can rest at night, and it'll take you through the process of handing your worries, your emotions up to the tree. This is a simple practice called Tonglen. In this practice, you breathe in what's hard. And I actually did it before with the stats. I said, let's breathe in all the stats, right? And then breathe out your wish for relief for yourself and anyone else who struggles in this way. So this one is really good if there's something happening and there's nothing you can do. And it could be that somebody's passing away. It could be that somebody's over there and somebody else has them in their care. It could be that it's somebody that it's not appropriate for you to do something about. It could be somebody raging at you at the counter. You breathe in all their struggle. You breathe it in. You're not trying to deflect it. You just breathe it in, and then you breathe out a wish for them to have relief. And it's a wish for them and you and anybody else who's struggling in this way to have a sense of relief, to have a sense of peace, to have a sense of healing. Breathing in what's hard and breathing out a wish for relief, a wish for peace, a wish for healing. It's incredibly effective. It sounds so simple, but so many of us who are helpers want other people to feel better, and sometimes there's no way that they can. And so this Tonglen practice can be very helpful. As a yoga teacher, I have to throw in that Yogis in Service is my not-for-profit, but there's tons of yoga, and there's lots of yoga online right now, and lots of free yoga online, actually. So consider it. Consider trying yoga, and try yoga for first responders. There's lots of resources now, so give that a shot and try and try again until you find the right teacher. If somebody's too woo-woo for you, like it's not for you. So, keep working. If you want chair yoga, find chair yoga. Like yoga is embodied meditation, and we know it works to downregulate the system. From everything from our elite military to sports professionals to first responders.
Catherine?
Yeah.
Tammy Wellston had a question. She said, I'm confused. Is it someone else's trauma that you ground out and then you ride the wave of your own emotions? Could you explain the difference?
Yeah. So if somebody else is having trauma, you would ground down. And then you're riding the wave of your own emotions. And those can be used together or separate, right? You could also ride the wave of I guess, their emotional experience too, because emotions come in a wave, but they're really two separate practices. So one of them is, okay, like I have my furniture, I'm in my office at UB, but in my private practice, I have furniture that's like wood so that I have a sense of the earth, right? And as a patient saying something that's really big and really emotional, I imagine it grounding into that wood and right into the earth and holding it there, like letting it pass into the kind of furniture and into the earth below me. Now, let's say I'm at home and my daughters are not teenagers anymore, but they were. So it's high level emotional practice, black belt level. Um, then I could, I'm in reaction, and I know when I'm in a peak reaction, it's not the best time for me as a parent to respond. So I can watch myself, like watch that wave and then watch it come down. And I can even say, like, right now I'm feeling a lot. And I want to let this move through me, and I'm going to respond to you in a bit. Right. So it's really just watching that wave. And for people with addiction, it can even be the wave of craving. Right. So emotion kicks us off. We want to like dig into the addiction instead of feeling our way through it. It arises and it passes. And when we act on the addiction, we actually can disrupt that process. So is that helpful?
It was to me.
Okay, great. Good. Yeah. So they're like just distinct processes. And thank you for asking that question. All right, a couple more. So we have, let's see, 13 more minutes. So the guest house, this is another poem from Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So I love that because we could even, when we're having an emotion, we can invite it in and have it sit down for tea. Hi, anger. Come on in. Sit down. Let me get you some tea. Tell me what's going on. Right. And this can be a journaling prompt. Oh, that's a lot, anger. Right. And we don't want to be, I am angry. We want to kind of be like, oh, like, there's a ton of anger present right now, and I want to understand it. What's coming up? So it's really kind of listening. Our emotions are not here for no reason. So we want to kind of not banish them, not turn them away, but answer the door. So honoring the effort and struggle. This is really important, especially when you have major life events happen in your shift. So of course, your sisterhood and your brotherhood, the family of all of us as helping professionals becomes very important. So here, and I talk to my daughter about this a lot, is even if you're not spiritual, religious, it can be helpful to do some kind of offering for those who pass. And you'd be surprised at how many of your coworkers would like to take part. And you can just put it out for an option. If anybody wants to stay and just take a few moments and breathe with Iris here, who has left us. And just pause, right? And then sometimes if you have people that, share faith or whatever it is, or even for yourself, taking a pause at the end of the shift and offering something up for the people who have passed, who are struggling from your shift. The spirituality aspect, and spirituality and religiosity are two different things. Spirituality is the broader thing, and underneath that we can be religious, and we can also just connect to a bigger sense of meaning. But that spirituality umbrella becomes a major resiliency factor in terms of self-care. This is on Insight Timer. This is actually Kristen Neff's webpage, but she's also on Insight Timer, that app I told you about. And she does a practice called Soften, Soothe, Allow. And this is on practice. It's about being with a difficult emotion. So if you've had a hard day, almost all my patients, I have practiced this one. She's really gifted. She's a researcher down in Texas and studies self-compassion in general. And she even has workshops in self-compassion, but this self-compassion meditation is very powerful. And it's a good one for if you've had a difficult shift.
I had a comment from Lauren. She said, I love Kristen Neff, so you're not alone.
Yeah, no, she's the jam. She also, I found out recently, she loves horses as much as I do. So I was really excited about that. And I think they just made a movie. I haven't seen it yet, but her son has autism and has made great gains through equestrian therapy or horse therapy. But her major work is in self-compassion, and she works with a lot of first responders. And then Pema Chodron's another great one. Our first step is to develop compassion for our own wounds. It's unconditional compassion for us that leads naturally to unconditional compassion for others. If we're willing to stand fully in our own shoes and never give up on ourselves, then we will be able to put ourselves in the shoes of others and never give up on them. That's one of my favorite quotes of hers. Good. And then getting to the last part, taking time. If you haven't done this, often we get into this work and we know why, whether it's when we're in high school or college and we're like, I know what I want to do and I know why. And then we get in the work and we forget. And what the research shows, research on humanitarian workers, is the more trauma they have, the more they forget. So the more your job is hard, you start to kind of drift away for your reasons why. And so part of our work we're doing with the United Nations Foundation is really helping people remember their why. Like, why did you get into this work? And this would be an important, if you're a journaler, it can be something to journal. If you're not, it's something to contemplate and their question to live. Some people just like to kind of chew on things. So thinking through, why am I in this work, right? What was it in the first place? And what keeps me going now? This is a really important self-care and resiliency factor. Mary Oliver, at the end of her poem, The Grasshopper, she says, tell me, what is it you plan to do with this wild and precious life, right? So what are you up to? What are you up to? Know your why. Because when you have the really bad days, that's what's going to get you through. Your heartfelt connection back to why I'm in this work. Because it's not going to be because someone saw what you did or someone acknowledged you. I mean, it's lovely when they do, but so often we're all lost in the hard day that we don't notice. We don't look up and notice each other. Yeah. And so it has to be about like digging deep into your why. So as first responders and healthcare workers, and all of us, honest to goodness, should have a resilience plan that it includes the self-care and the sense of mission. And what exactly, and no, neither outweighs the other. Because without one, the other just can't exist, right? The self-care, that's like, I don't even know, right? That's like, I guess if you're just wealthy and that's all you do, but even then people are lost and feel soulless without a mission, right? So even in the best conditions, that's not enough, right? And then missions can't be sustained in a healthy way in which you can be kind to others, right? Hard to hurt yourself without hurting other people. without the self-care. So creating your resilience plan that includes your dreams, your goals for work, for private life, right? Those are clear to you. And they might not be clear now. You live those questions. What do I want? What do I want in my private life? What do I want through my professional life? And live your way into the answers. Don't don't say you have to know, Catherine, you must know right now. Like, no, maybe not. But ask, what is it? And then develop your self-care plan, because that's going to make these things possible. My friend Steve Procknall he does tons of fitness stuff around here as a yoga teacher, but he's like, so many people are so focused on saving enough money for their retirement, but they fail to plan for their retirement physically. So they don't take care of themselves because they're so busy getting the money together for retirement that when their retirement comes, they can't travel. They can't do stuff, right? They're not healthy enough. So this kind of the self-care piece ends up making your personal life and even transitioning to retirement more possible. So you take your self-assessment, and you guys know where the link is, and then you look at your plan, and then making this commitment to self-care. So once you finish your assessment, you can pick your lowest domains, and then maybe pick 2 items or areas for action. Just don't make it too big, because when you make your goals too big, I've been there. I have grandiose plans, small accomplishable steps. Like you say, I'm going to meditate every day for 20 minutes. That if you don't meditate, that will never work. But you can say, I'm going to try to get 10 minutes in a week. So I'm going to see about 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there. I'm going to wake up in the morning, go for a walk around the block, not 5 miles. Like, really true self-care starts on small, accomplishable steps where you can feel successful. And then making a daily commitment to connect to your why, and then engage in at least 2 things a day that are about your self-care, not anything else but that. And that's what it looks like in a day. So this is one of my favorite quotes. If I can move this box a little bit. And so I said to my body softly, I want to be your friend. It took a long breath and replied, I have been waiting my whole life for this. And that's another one of my favorite quotes. And that's your webinar today. Are there any questions or thoughts? We have a couple minutes. Oh, and I can stop share.
There was so much great stuff in there. There's a lot. There's a lot to process.
It's exciting, isn't it? To kind of think of the possibilities.
It really is.
Self-care can feel oppressive, but I like thinking of it as like an opportunity to kind of have the life you've been hoping to have. And it's not like you better get a massage every other week. Although, shoot, that'd be nice. But
yes, that would be nice. Are there any questions that you'd like to put in the chat? This is the time to do that. Also, the time for questions is whenever. So if you ever have a question for either myself or Catherine, please let me know. You can reach me at my email address, which is lgreen@r-ahec.org. And I would get in touch with Catherine for you. And Catherine said we can share her slides, so we'll have some information that you can glean from there. This ends our webinar series, not just this session, but our webinar series. I want to thank each and every one of you for being part of our series. Those who registered and will watch this later, and those who are participating live. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you and with all our presenters. Thank you so much, Catherine, for taking this time out of your day. Great information. Absolutely loved it. And I'd love to work with you again sometime.
Yeah, happy to.
Diane Wilkinson says, I'm looking forward to rewatching this video when available. So it will be available probably by this afternoon, but definitely by the end of day tomorrow on our website, and I will send everybody the link. She said, so much good information. Thank you.
Oh, you're
So
welcome. Yeah, and I'll send you the PDF of the slides right after this, so you have it.
great. Thank you so much. Here, let me share my last slide here. Just so you can see that evaluation link there. If you would like to go to that page and do an evaluation for this session or any of the other sessions that you've attended. And don't forget, if you do watch a recording of one of the sessions, you are welcome to leave an evaluation of any of the sessions on that link. That'll be up for quite a while, so don't be shy to do that. Again, thank you, Catherine, and thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful holiday coming up. Take care.
Take care, everybody.